Hey everyone, Dr. Aaron Moreland here with Vallejo Health and Wellness Center in Eden Prairie. Today I want to talk to you about forgiveness. So I've been talking to you about a lot of different things when it comes to physical health, but today I want to talk about forgiveness because it can lead to actually physical issues if you're dealing with lack of forgiveness. And the reason I want to talk about it is recently I was watching an interview with a guy named Nick Bare. He was interviewing another guy, Joe Greer, who's a professional photographer. And their interview, part of the interview went to talk about some of the things that had happened in Joe Greer's life that he needed to find forgiveness. And it reminded me of an event, or really a series of events that happened to me about a dozen years ago. I started dealing with some pretty significant depression. I'm talking depression where I can't get out of bed, depression where I don't want to live anymore. It was significant, but it didn't start off that way. It really started off on the weekend. I'd have a good weekend, but by Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, I started feeling pretty anxious about going to work the next day, and I couldn't figure out why. That anxiety would go away though when I got to work and started work in the morning on Monday, but then that anxiety crept into Monday morning and then into Monday afternoon and then Tuesday, and by the middle of the week I was feeling still anxious about having to go into work, to the point where I started being more and more depressed, didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, and in fact there were some days that I would just tell my wife that no, I'm not going to work. Well, she would literally make me get up and literally dress me so that I could go to work and go through the day. And it did get to the point where I did a few days just decide to not even come into work, which is very interesting because I love to work. I love to do what I do for a living as a chiropractor. So it really wasn't making much sense, but I couldn't, what really was the hard part about it is I couldn't pinpoint, like, where's this coming from? Seemingly I had everything going for me, or had a beautiful wife, we had 3 kids, nothing really had happened to me. Business was going pretty good, and so again, where was this coming from? And so I couldn't figure it out. I started talking to my wife about it, really just telling her what I was thinking, and probably the biggest thing that put fear into her was I started talking about, like, I don't even want to be here on this earth. I'm not going to do any harm to myself, but if God was to say, hit me with a bus, I'd be good with that, because then I could be done with this. I wouldn't have to deal with this anxiety and depression anymore. And so she was really encouraging me, you got to go get some help, whether it's maybe you have to get on a medication, which I just didn't feel like there was anything like chemically off, because nothing had happened. I've been okay up to this point. So what would have changed in my health that would have impacted that? And so I decided to start going to a therapist. It was a therapist that I was actually in a networking group, and she would always talk about how she was a life coach, she was a professional therapist, and then she also did this thing called healing prayer, which I'd never heard of before. So I decided, you know what, I know her, I trust her, I'm going to go meet with her. So we sat down for the first time and talked about kind of the game plan, what were we going to do. And I had told her, because I wasn't really big about, oh, let's spend all this time talking about all the bad things that had happened in my life and those kind of things. I just felt like, you know, bad things happen to everybody, so why do we need to sit and harp about that? And she said, well, that's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to try to dig down to what lies you might be believing. And so that was kind of interesting. I'd never heard that before, but she did talk about how we can believe these things that aren't true. You know, when we look at a spiritual aspect, and we look at Satan is the father of all lies, and he can be lying to you, she said, and yet you're believing it as truth. And I'm like, well, this is interesting. I've never heard this before. So yeah, let's dig in. So met with her for a few sessions. Didn't really see a whole lot of changes in my behavior. I was still anxious, I was still depressed. Didn't really feel like we were making any headways. I didn't feel like we were really discovering anything that was new or undiscovered as far as what I was feeling. But I do remember one time going to her, and we started talking about relationships. And she said, well, let's dig into your relationships with your family. So she asked, well, how was your relationship with your mom? I had a great mom, very supportive, really always praying for me. And so I just told her, I have a great relationship with my mom. My mom has been a great support. She's made up for a lot of things that have happened in my life that has been very helpful in my life. And so she said, okay, so let's talk about your relationship with your dad. And so, well, there's a lot of things that happened, and things that my dad had done, and things that had happened to me that I really had held against my dad. But I told her, I think I'm pretty sure I've forgiven him of those things. And she said, okay, well, when's the last time you talked to him? I said, well, it's been 5 years since I've talked to him. I have no plan on ever talking to him again. And she said to me, it's not for me to judge, but from my point of view, I don't think you actually have forgiven your dad. But rather than me deciding whether you haven't or not, why don't we stop and pray about that and just see if God convicts you of it. So we stopped, we prayed, we just asked God, like, if I hadn't forgiven my dad, that I should be convicted of it somehow. So we prayed. Nothing really happened right there in the spot. So I thought, nothing's again gonna happen here. Nothing's been discovered here. But anyways, went home, and a few weeks later I get a letter from my dad. I hadn't heard from my dad in years, and I get a letter from my dad, and my dad in the letter wrote that I know you don't want anything to do with me, but I do want to have a relationship with my grandkids. Is there a way? We're driving through town. He lives up in Canada still. We're driving through Minneapolis, and is there a way that I can just spend some time with my grandchildren? Well, right there, as I read that letter, it was very convicting. One is like, okay, the timing of this is pretty, not just a coincidence that this, haven't heard from my dad in years. We say this prayer 2 weeks later, I get this letter. So I know that the timing is not a coincidence. And then the other thing is, okay, this is ridiculous that my dad has to ask me this to just be able to see his grandchildren. It really convicted me that I hadn't forgiven him. The last time I had talked to him on the phone, I just kind of lit into him as to all the shortcomings that he had as a father, and we ended up hanging up on each other, and that was the last time I had talked to him. So I got on the phone right after I read that letter. I got on the phone and I told him, Dad, all the things that I held against you in that phone call, I forgive you of those things. And when I did that, I could feel an instant change. In fact, that depression was gone like that. It was just completely gone. I just felt like a completely different person from making that phone call. And so the reason I share this video with you is that you can have physical issues that are related to either a spiritual rooted issue or an emotional rooted illness, and they can present themselves as physical or vice versa. So it's really important that when we look at overall health, we don't want to just look at our health from a physical aspect. We want to look at it from emotional, and we want to look at it from a spiritual aspect, because we really are a three-part being. We're physical, we're mental, and we're spiritual. And so if we just look at the physical, we can miss out on a lot of different things. So one of the things we do in our office here at Vallejo is we try to figure out, is there anything going on emotionally or spiritually? It may not be that we can help them if it is emotional or spiritual. We may have to refer them to someone that deals with that. But we actually do a fair bit with the work dealing with people with emotional and spiritual health as well. But I'm not trying to say at all that all depression is related to harboring unforgiveness, but what I'm saying is that it could. And so you really want to go to a health provider that's going to look not just at you as a physical person, but also as a spiritual person, because you are both, okay? And so it really saved my life, because I had no idea what to do about that issue, and I knew that I wasn't going to get solutions by just approaching it from, say, taking a medication or just doing some therapy. It really was a lie that I was believing. I was believing that I'd forgiven my father, and I hadn't. And so now I have a great relationship with my dad. Just had the opportunity to meet up with him and my brother and go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's really freeing to have given up that bitterness and harboring that unforgiveness against them. So again, Could be that you're dealing with something that's more than just a physical aspect, even though that's what it seems like. So again, hopefully these are helpful. Hopefully these videos are helping you doing things that you could be looking at with your own health, helping you to either discover what's wrong, potentially doing things on your own that could be helpful, or making sure you get to the right health provider when you are dealing with a health issue. So again, my name is Dr. Aaron Moreland with Vallejo Health and Wellness Center, and hopefully you're having a great day. God bless.